the famous 4% rule can help you determine how much money you need to be financially free. There are 2 reasons you might actually need less than 25 times your annual living costs. Let me explain. The 4% rule is based on research published by William Bingham in 1994. He found that retirees throughout history could have withdrawn 4% of a 50-50 stock bond portfolio annually for at least 30 years without running out of money. But despite its overwhelming success, the 4% rule seems to be the limit when it comes to withdrawal rates. When Bingham tested a 5% withdrawal rate, he found that it was too high to work consistently. In some periods, the 5% withdrawal rate only gave retirees 20 years of income before running out of money. Since running out of money was not acceptable, Bingham suggested the 4% as the highest safe withdrawal rate, and this stuck. Let's look at this equation. 4% of your investment fund or total savings equals your annual spending. That's equal to the fraction of 1/25 of your investment fund is equal to your annual spending. And if we rework this equation, your investment fund should be equal to your annual spending times 25. So let's look at the 2 reasons you might need less than 25 times your annual spending in your financial freedom fund. If you'll receive some form of guaranteed income in your retirement years, that could mean social security benefits or payments from a defined benefit pension plan. That could mean you actually need to save up less for the spending that you'll be doing in your retirement years. You will only need to save up for what you will be spending above the amount of guaranteed income you'll be receiving. So your fund will be equal to 25 times your annual excess spending, which is the amount you expect to spend over and above the guaranteed income you'll receive. Some of us have no idea where we'll retire. And also, you might not live in a country long enough to qualify for the social security benefits. Also, you might live in a country where the social security benefits are almost negligible, and they definitely won't actually help you during your retirement years. Exception number 1 might not be applicable to you, but let's look at exception number 2. The 4% rule assumes that annual spending will increase with 3% every year, which is in line with long-term US inflation. But research from JP Morgan shows as we age, we actually might be spending less. They looked at which age group was spending the most money, and the highest spending was among households aged 45 to 49, and it dropped in each successive group, which I find quite interesting. In fact, their research suggests instead of spending increasing with 3% per year, it declines with 1% per year during retirement. Among US households aged 65 to 74, average annual spending was $44,800. For households above 75, it was only $33,700. The older age group was spending 25% less because they're less likely to buy new cars, new clothes, or go on expensive holidays. And if they're homeowners, their mortgages have already been paid off. At the start of my investing course, I give everyone a retirement calculator, which they can use to look at their current spending and also project their spending given long-term inflation rates and look at what their retirement spending would look like by the time that they reach 65. Most people are really shocked to see that their current investments would not be able to maintain them during their retirement. And also, they're very shocked to see what retirement would actually cost them, because we tend to underestimate the impact of inflation on our living costs. And really just small tweaks in your calculations, like the returns that you earn on your investments or the fees on your investments or the inflation rates in your country, can really have a massive impact on your long-term retirement savings and also how long your savings will last for during retirement. I love this simple chart, which looks at your savings rate and how long it will take to reach financial freedom. So for a typical professional with a 40-year working life, they would need to invest 15% of their annual income in order to reach financial freedom by the age of 65. And then as you increase your savings rate, your working years or the years that you need to invest for decreases. And if you can save very aggressively, you can significantly bring down your working years. Of course, it's not always realistic. I want to talk about the 40-year working life and the 15% investing rate, because a lot of people tend to rely exclusively on pension from their employers or retirement annuities that their employers have put in place. And from what I've seen, most people are so shocked when they get to the age of 50 and they realize that actually that the retirement that they've been building up through their employer's funds are not going to be sufficient to sustain them. So really start looking into this earlier rather than later. And if you're contributing 10% to your employer's pension fund, for example, I would really encourage you to look at least topping that up with another 5 to 10%. But look at doing this outside your employer's pension portfolio, really, because this will allow you to take control of those investments and also to start keeping track of that and make sure that it's invested in the smartest way and that you're not paying unnecessary fees. The thing that I've seen with employer pension funds is that it's really invested for the larger group of employees. It's not invested in a way that it's tailored to your profile. For example, if you're still a young professional, you can take much more risk in the stock market than someone that's closer to retirement age. And that is essential to get long-term growth. But an employer pension might just be investing you alongside everyone else. And that means you're getting the same kind of risk exposure as someone that is over 60 years old. So taking control of a portion of your investments yourself and taking more risk, especially if you're younger, is really essential in order to build up a significant investment or retirement portfolio for yourself. And if your ambition is to retire before the age of 65, then look at topping your investments up more aggressively and contributing an additional 15 or 20% into your own investment portfolio. If you're serious about reaching financial freedom and you want to make sure that your investments are actually done in the best way for you, then I've got a free masterclass where I share my roadmap to reaching financial freedom. Follow the link in the video or comment class and I'll share the link with you. Also, very important to note, this 15% would be sufficient if you had started investing at the age of 25, because that would mean 40-year investing timeline. But if you're over the age of 30 or 40, then you would need to start looking at investing much more aggressively, and 15% would not be sufficient. In this case, you would need to look at investing more than 20, 25 or 30% of your annual income. I've got a calculator that you can use to determine what your financial freedom number is. This calculator is based on the 4% rule, so it will look at your annual living costs and then multiply that by 25. Of course, this is very dependent on what your annual living cost would look like in retirement. If you don't think that you will be spending as much as you are right now during retirement, then you might not need a 25 times multiple of your annual spending. So depending on the multiple that you need to save up in your investment fund, my calculator will then help you determine how much you will need to invest in order to reach your financial freedom number. Something important to note is that we look at real returns on investments. And this is the rate of investment net of inflation. That would mean looking at the long-term average annual returns on investments and deducting the long-term average inflation. And this is important because we need to consider the impacts of inflation in order to get to the real value of your investments and to make sure the real value of investments will be able to cover your annual living costs by the time that you reach your financial freedom or retirement age. The calculator will then also allow you to see what the impact is once you start adding fees to your investment returns. This is really because I want to encourage you to do a deep dive into index investing and to understand why this is the smartest, lowest cost way of investing. I talk about this a lot on my channel, so you probably have heard about this, and there is so much information out there on the internet to teach you and to help you understand why index investing has attracted a lot of investors, because over the last 20 years, we've seen and the data has proved to us that index investing is the smartest way of being a passive investor. There is a reason a lot of money is flowing out of actively managed funds into passive index funds. And it's really never been simpler to be an index investor. And two of my favorite authors, which is Nick McGuiley and Morgan Housel, actually talks about index investing in their books as well. And there's a very cool YouTuber called Ben Felix, and he does a lot of videos on index investing if you want to understand it better. But I think these books are a good start. And Morgan Housel actually has a book called The Psychology of Money as well, where he talks about his approach to investing, and it talks about how all of his money is mainly invested in index funds. Because if you're a passive index investor, that means you're just tracking the average of the market. And to quote one of my favorite authors, Morgan Housel, he says, average returns for an above average period equals extreme outperformance. And that is the most obvious secret in investing. So I would really encourage you to do some research on this and to understand this topic better for yourself. And you can always come back to my channel if you want to learn more about that. Thanks for watching. See you next time.